Dart for Trice. That's Chase, and what a start for Cincinnati. And he has the football for Saluba. Bijan Robinson, he's going to have his first NFL touchdown. Gibbs out of the backfield right away. Oh, yeah, there's no question that he was grabbed. They got ridiculous. They got Gibbs one-on-one with Andrew Van Ginkel in space, and that was it.
And this is, again, it's man-to-man. It's one-on-one, and he's underneath. He loses his balance. Block Bowers is one of those guys that has a huge... And this is...
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty Podcast, presented by the FantasyHolics Podcast Network, live on YouTube. As you can see, a little thinner this week. No Fatboy Brant. He did his solo sleeper episode last week. This time it is my turn. I am 2 days removed from South Carolina, sitting and getting a tan because, listen, anybody can tell you this, and I'll vouch for it. Tan fat looks a hell of a lot better than pale fat. But that is why we had to do a solo episode last week. Brant's got some commitments this week. It just worked out well for him to come on and put some of his sleepers out so I could come on today and put some of my sleepers this week to watch. And I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I haven't even listened to Brant's episode yet this week. Just been so busy with vacation, nonstop doing stuff with the kids during that, and then getting home, going straight into getting our pool liner replaced and work done on the pool. And it's just been chaotic and hectic. So there's a small outside chance Brant and I will come up with some of the same sleepers. Granted, there's only 3 of them for him and 3 of them for me. I know I like a lot more players than just that. So we'll see how this goes this week. But it should be a short, sweet episode. I'm going to get to the point here, get right to it. That way I can get you guys out of here this week. Hopefully the Fatboyz are back together next week. Getting you ready for, catching up on OTA hype and things of that nature. So first and foremost, I'm going to start out with a player at the running back position. And I want to reiterate, these guys are sleepers. These guys are guys that have to have things go right the rest of the off season and early into the season to really make a ton of fantasy noise. I think all 3 of them are 24 years of age or younger. So there's still some shelf life for these guys. And I do expect these guys to all 3 be fantasy relevant at some point. For a couple of them, that may be later rather than sooner. But anyway, I'm going to start off with the running back position. And my sleeper at the running back position is simple. It's Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. This is a guy that honestly I liked a lot coming out of college. I think had he have come from any college outside of Texas, sitting behind Bijan Robinson, there's a chance he would have been drafted higher, had a little bit more draft equity, and already be more fantasy relevant because he was explosive at the University of Texas when he got his time and got his touches to spell Bijan. But again, there's a lot of things that have lined up to make me more excited about Roschon Johnson than I already was this year. Obviously, the addition of Ben Johnson as the head coach, who, listen, we've talked about it until everybody's been blue in the face. He ran DeAndre Swift out of Detroit when he first got there and wanted to, get Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. A lot of people expected that to happen through the draft. It did not. So he's going into the season with, Swift as the 1 and Johnson as the 2. So I do think there's a chance you see Chicago try to establish a 1-2 punch with Swift and Johnson this year, much in the way that Detroit did with Gibbs and Montgomery. Obviously, different levels of expectations there. One of those is an elite pairing. Gibbs is arguably top 3 running back in fantasy. Montgomery's probably top 20 in his own right. So, definitely different expectations. But if there's even close to a 50-50 split or 60-40 split in Chicago, there's going to be some value for Roschon Johnson. And this is a guy that's going, almost undrafted in startups. You can get for pennies on the dollar in leagues if he's rostered. Last year, he did finish as the RB54, largely in part due to having 6 rushing touchdowns. He got some goal line work last year. But the other selling point for me on this, and it's very simple, is the Bears' offensive line last year was atrocious. They made that priority number 1 this offseason to go out and get some protection for Caleb Williams, which in hindsight is going to have a trickle-down effect for the run game, obviously. If the passing game is more respected, then that opens some natural running lanes and things of that nature. So, again, I think Roschon Johnson is probably a flex play if it ends up going the way I think it does. If DeAndre Swift happens to get hurt or it ends up being a heavier workload for Roschon Johnson, I think this could be a guy that you talk about being a league winner at the end of the season who you can get right now for free. I think he's one of the best cheap low-end running backs to buy at this point. All right, moving on to my wide receiver position. This one is a guy that I was extremely excited about last year. Did not necessarily hit the ground running in Indianapolis, but this is Adonai Mitchell, 22-year-old wide receiver, another player that did hail from the University of Texas. Mitchell is a guy that I think in a lot of ways suffered due to quarterback play in Indy last year, like a lot of the other skill position players did. If you weren't Alec Pierce in week 1 or Jonathan Taylor down the stretch, it was kind of a wish-washy season for all those pass catchers. The thing that I think the skill position players in Indy have going for them is eventually that quarterback position has to get better. And at 22 years of age, I still like Adonai Mitchell to end up potentially being the one. I know a lot of people are going to scream Michael Pittman. That's fine. Michael Pittman's probably the one, but I don't think he's a true one. I think this team is a very much run first team. Even with Anthony Richardson under center, it's still that way because he's more likely to be effective running the ball than he is passing. But Daniel Jones is there, which again doesn't elicit a lot of confidence in the skill position players because he wasn't good in New York. But again, I think there's some room for improvement for these guys. Again, the price tag is very appealing. These guys, you're getting them for, as throw-ins on bigger deals for 3rd and 4th round rookie picks. You can take a stab at a guy like Adonai Mitchell, who again in 2 years or the year after this year, even this year, if something happens and Riley Leonard ends up being a quarterback, or maybe Daniel Jones figures it out, or hey, Anthony Richardson figures it out, one of those 3 things, all of a sudden you're looking at a guy who, outside of Tyler Warren, in my personal opinion, has the chance to be the number 1 pass catcher in the wide receiver room, because I think it's just that wide open. I think Alec Pierce has shown, flashes. I think Michael Pittman obviously has shown the most over the time at this point. But there's still a lot of meat left on the bone in Indy. I think this wide receiver room could be a lot like the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room, where each and every week you don't necessarily know who the guy's going to be. But I think Adonai Mitchell eventually inserts himself fully as the number 1. And again, this is a player that I've rostered in a few leagues last year in rookie drafts. So obviously there's a little bit of expectations or wants to be expectations for me. But what I'm reading from OTAs in Indy is very exciting about Adonai Mitchell. Definitely explosive, quick cuts. Definitely looks very much the part of a wide receiver who's coming into his 2nd year with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more muscle, a little bit bigger frame. And I think, again, for the price tag you're paying on Adonai Mitchell, he's a safer dart throw than a lot of the other players that would be in that same category, that same tier, if you will. Okay. All right, here it is. My favorite one. I saved the best for last. This is one who, if you've spent any time listening to the Fatboyz Dynasty podcast, My last solo episode I did prior to the NFL draft, I talked about some guys out of the tight end position that I liked a lot, that I thought could really do some stuff in the combine and help themselves out. And the name that I kept referring to was Terrence Ferguson. Probably outside of obviously the two obvious one in Loveland and Warren, the best draft capital in the draft. Arguably, you could even say his draft capital is more important because my Atlanta Falcons traded with the Rams for their first round pick. So the Rams didn't pick until the second round of the first pick. Their number one priority was Terrence Ferguson out of the University of Oregon. This guy is explosive. This guy genuinely could be what we've always thought Kyle Pitts was going to be, that unicorn at the tight end position. Just a freak athlete, very quick, strong hands, big frame, high points the ball well. Everything you want out of a tight end. And he comes from the high-flying, high-powered offense of the Oregon Ducks. Again, first pick in a Sean McVay offense, first pick of the draft for Sean McVay. They're going to use this guy. They're going to scheme him. They're going to get him involved. Here's some positives that I have going for him that are also slightly negatives. The team's older, right? You got 37-year-old, I believe, 37-year-old Matthew Stafford under center. Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, obviously younger. And then Tyler Higbee, the tight end one on that roster at this point, is also 32 years of age. I think there is a clear path for Terrence Ferguson to have some good value this year. Goes into the conversation next year, where if Higbee's gone out the door and maybe you get one more year of Matthew Stafford, I think you're talking Terrence Ferguson as a top 10 tight end in year 2. I think he's going to have some top 10 weeks this year because I just think he's that darn explosive. Again, I'm thinking there's a serious chance that Terrence Ferguson goes nuclear a couple times this year, just because of everything else that factors out around him. You know, if Higbee's out, if Devontae Adams is missing time, you know, even if those guys are on the field, I think he's talented enough that he could get 3-4 catches and take those for, 60 yards and a touchdown. And everybody's going, hey, that's a tight end 5 this week. And again, this is a guy who's 22 years of age, going into an offense with one of the most brilliant offensive minds in football in Sean McVay, a very, very savvy veteran quarterback in Stafford, and then again gets to, if what they're saying about Terrence Ferguson and what the tape shows and everything that stands out is true, that he is as freakishly talented as he is, he's going to be learning from Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, definitely picking up some skills and some traits from those guys. All Terrence Ferguson's going to have to be able to do is be able to block in 12-man personnel. And I think you're going to see him just skyrocket, be on the field a lot this year, and really, really make a massive difference for the Los Angeles Rams. I think the Rams are going to be very fun to watch this year. I think that offense is going to be very exciting. And again, I kind of feel like I'm having diarrhea of the mouth here with Terrence Ferguson, but this is a guy that I really, really planted my flag on this year, and I'm trying to stick to it. Last year, I planted my flag on Bucky Irving out of the University of Oregon early in the offseason. Then I kind of let myself get faded by the landing spot with Rashad White. I'm not letting that happen this year. I've got that flag planted very, very deep in the Terrence Ferguson world. And I just genuinely think this is a guy that 2 to 3 years from now is a top 10 tight end that we're talking about every single year, that is going to be very, very sought after. Again, if you look at the tight end world and where it's at nowadays, we get tight end production year 1 now where we didn't used to. Sam Laporta's, Dalton Kincaid's, Brock Bowers last year. Obviously, Brock Bowers is on a different planet, but we get these early tight end productions from these guys in a position that 5 to 6 years ago, it took these guys 2 to 3 years to catch on, to get to the NFL speed, to get everything figured out that it needed for them to have playing time. This is a different NFL. These guys are different breeds of athletes. These guys are coming. They're going to make an impact immediately. I like Terrence Ferguson. If you walk away from a rookie draft with him, or he goes undrafted and you're able to pick him up afterwards, I think this guy could end up being the steal of the draft late. I think he's going to be a stud in several different weeks, and next year you'll really see the reward from that position. So again, not to try to have diarrhea at the mouth, but it's running back Roschon Johnson, wide receiver Adonai Mitchell, tight end Terrence Ferguson for my 3 sleepers. I would love to revisit this list with Brant next week when we get together again and kind of see where we're at, and maybe potentially revisit these in a couple of years or a couple of weeks and see how we do. Got a quick question from Paul I'm going to answer here. Who are your 3 rookies you would say are deep sleepers, possible dart throw and rookie drafts? So that's tough, Paul, because I think every league's a little bit different. Not so much as a super deep rookie sleeper. I do think Jaden Higgins has a chance to be the wide receiver 1 in this class. He's obviously going in the mid to late second round. Terrence Ferguson obviously is one of my guys. Devin Neal out of the University of Kansas got drafted by the New Orleans Saints. I think he might be a year away after Alvin Kamara skates out the door. But I do like Devin Neal there for the running back position, Jaden Higgins for the wide receiver. If I had to go deeper than Jaden Higgins, I'd probably lean Pat Bryant. Is a guy I like an awful lot. Jaden Royals is a guy I like an awful lot for the Kansas City Chiefs. That scouting department's done a really good job in the last couple of years picking out super talented wide receivers. And if I had to pick a tight end other than Terrence Ferguson, I'd go with Arroyo there for Seattle. The really only competition he's got is Noah Fant, who's been lackluster at this point. Arroyo was a stud in Miami. I think he could end up being something in the NFL that he may take a little longer, I think, than Terrence Ferguson, but definitely some value there. I just think if you're talking sleepers, because this is such a deep running back class and everybody's draft is different. In some drafts after J.K. Dobbins gets signed in Denver, maybe R.J. Harvey slides. I don't know, and then he becomes a sleeper. He shouldn't. But that's a possibility. But if you're talking genuinely guys that aren't going to be top 2 draft picks or top 2 rounds, Devin Neal's 1, probably Royals or Pat Bryant there at the wide receiver position, and then Arroyo at tight end if I had to go deep sleepers in a rookie draft, Paul. Okay. All right, guys, that kind of does it for me this week. Again, a little harder to just come sit on here and ramble without Brant. To toss this back and forth to. Hopefully the 2 of us are back together in action next week, get the full Fatboyz team together and come at you guys with some content to get you ready for the season. But that does do it for me today. So as always, stay hungry and stay fat, my friends.